Good evening, guys. In the last session, we discussed about how Spring Boot start class will work internally and what is @Spring Boot application annotation, what is boot configuration, what is auto configuration, what is component scanning, and what is base package naming convention in the Spring Boot, and what is Spring application dot run method, and what start class method is doing internally, and how IOC container is getting created in the Spring Boot, how Spring Boot application type will be identified as part of the run method, and what actually the run method is doing internally, and what is banner in the Spring Boot. We understood all those details. So today we are going to talk about runners in Spring Boot. Today we will talk about runners in Spring Boot. All right. So what is a runner in the Spring Boot? Runners are used to execute the code only once the IOC container started. So as we have seen yesterday, as part of our Spring application dot run method, you can check that at the last step of the run method, runners are getting executed. If you see the line number 314, here we have the logic to call the runners. Call runners method is available. So what is that runner? Why we need that runner? How to create the runner? And what is the real-time scenario to go for the runners? Runners in the Spring Boot. Runners are used to execute. Runners are used to execute. Runners are used to execute the logic only once when application got started. Runners will be called as part of run method. Spring application dot run method is calling the runners. Spring application run method will call runners. Will call runners. In Spring Boot, we have two types of runners. In Spring Boot, we have two types of runners. So what are those two types of runners? First one is called as application runner, and the second one is called as command line runner. First one is application runner and the second one is command line runner. So these both are interfaces only. Application runner is one interface and command line runner is also one interface. So these runners are used to execute the logic only once when boot application got started. Now, who is going to call these runners? These runners will be called from run method. How many types of runners we have in the Spring Boot? We have two types of runners in the Spring Boot. One is called application runner. Second one is command line runner. So let us see how to work with those runners in the boot application and when they are getting executed. So let me create one new project, new Spring Starter project. I'm going to create 06 Spring Boot 06 runners application. I'm creating, file, new Spring Starter project. So here name I need to give for that. I'm giving the name as runners application. Now type I'm choosing Maven. Packaging type is jar, Java version, language, group ID, artifact ID, package name. Click on next. 2.7.8 version. So dependencies. As of now, I am not selecting any dependency. Simply I'm clicking on next and I'm clicking on finish. So my runners application got created. Let me close the remaining projects. I'm closing the remaining projects. So just runners application is open. If you see the pom.xml, when we create a Spring Boot application, by default, boot starter will come as a dependency. So this boot starter is providing all the information which is required to run our Spring Boot standalone application. So when you create a boot application, by default, this dependency is coming. You no need to do anything. But directly you can develop a standalone application. Right click on this project, run as boot application. So when you right click on run as Spring Boot application, you can see on the console, banner will be printed and it will print the time taken to start our application. Spring logo is printing on the console. This is called banner. In the last session, we discussed how to customize that banner and what are the modes available, how to stop the banner printing also. Perfect. Now here, I want to create one runner. So let me create one class, new class. You can create that class in any package. I'm creating a class in the runner package, my app runner, my app runner. So this my app runner class should implement one interface called application runner. So to represent this class as a application runner, I'm going to implement one interface called application runner interface, which is predefined interface in the Spring Boot. So whenever we implement a interface, we need to override all the abstract methods available in the interface. Whenever we implement a interface, we need to override all the abstract methods in the interface. In this interface, we are having a run method, which is taking application arguments, system.out.println. I can say that app runner executed. App runner run method executed. Just to understand whether this method is called or not, I'm writing one SOP statement inside this run method. My class is implementing an interface. I want to represent this class as a Spring Bean. To represent this class as a Spring Bean, I'm going for component annotation. To represent this Java class as a Spring Bean, I'm going for component annotation. All right. Now let me run this one. Run as boot application. Run as boot application. Guys, can you see the runner is executed or the runner is not executed? Am I calling the runner or it is called by default by IOC container, the run method? Am I calling the runner or runner is executed by default as part of the run method? It is executing by default by the run method. So now, we created one runner by using our predefined interface called application runner. Public class my runner implements application runner. So it is used to execute how many times the runner is executing in the project, guys? How many times this runner will execute in the project? Only one time as part of the run method. Okay. So similarly, we are having one more type of runner in the Spring Boot, which is called as command line runner. So right click on this project, new class, my CMD runner. My CMD runner. So this class is also implementing interface called command line runner. So when we implement the interface, we need to override the method. I'm overriding run method. Inside this also, I'm writing one message system.out.println my CMD runner run method called. My CMD runner run method called. So this is a normal Java class. So I want to represent this class as a Spring Bean. For that, I'm using @component annotation. For this, I'm using @component annotation. My CMD runner class I'm creating. Now go to start class and let's run this application, run as boot application. So when I run as a boot application, can you see application runner is executed and a command line runner is also executed. So both runners are getting called as part of our run method. If you see what is the difference between command line runner and application runner, can you observe and tell me what is the difference between command line runner and application runner? Guys, can you check this and tell me? So this is my application runner interface. This is my application runner interface. And this is my command line runner interface. Implementation classes. One class is implementing application runner interface and another class is implementing command line runner interface. So check these two runners and tell me what are the differences between these two runners. Check these two runners and tell me what are the differences between these two runners. Check these two runners and tell me what are the differences between these two runners. Come on, guys. Are you clear? What is the difference? Arguments are the different. Method parameters are the different. Okay, guys. So here, application runner run method is taking application arguments object as a parameter, whereas command line runner is taking variable argument as a parameter. So all the arguments that you supply for your method will be received as a application arguments in the application runner, whereas arguments will be received in the string format when you go for command line runner. So what is the use case? Can you guys guess any use case to implement runners in your project? Guys, can you think and tell me any use case which is used to runner in the Spring Boot? You got the concept of the Spring Boot runner, right? Runners are used to execute the logic only once when the boot application got started. Spring application.run method will call the runners. In Spring Boot, we have two types of runners. One is application runner and another one is command line runner. Application runner and command line runners are two interfaces. They are having run method. Application runner run method is taking application arguments object as a parameter. Command line runner run method is taking string arguments as a parameter. Can you tell me any use case? Can you tell me any use case to go for runners in the Spring Boot? Come on, guys. Can you tell me any use case to go for the runners? Use cases to go for the runners. Runners use cases. In which scenario we need to use runners in the project? Now, the first one is loading data from DB to cache memory. When my application is started, I want to retrieve some data from the database and I want to store in the cache. So how many times you will store the data into cache? Only one time when the project is started. So now my application want to access some data, which is static data. Every time I don't want to read the data from the database. This is my application and this is my database. In my database, the data is static. In my database, the data is static. So here, if I read the data every time from the database, there is no use because data is the same. Unnecessarily, we are increasing the traffic between Java application and database. Necessarily, we are going to increase traffic between Java application and database. To avoid that problem, in my project, I'm going to create a cache. Cache nothing but it is a map where I will store the data in the form of key and value pair. I'm creating a cache in my project. In that cache, I want to store the data. Whenever I need the data, I want to take it from the cache only, not from the database. Now, when my project is started, I want to take the data from the database and I want to store in the cache. When my application is running, I need to take it from cache only, not from database. Why? Because cache will be available inside our JVM. We can easily access that data. If I want to access the same data from the database, network call is required. My Java application should talk to a database. So I don't want to do that. In that scenario, can I go for a runner? Guys, in that scenario, can I go for a runner? I will create a runner in my project. Whenever project is started, runner will execute. Runner will execute only one time. My runner will fetch the data from the database and my runner will store the data into cache memory. My runner will fetch the data from the database and my runner will store the data into cache memory. How many times we need to load the data from database and store into cache? Only one time when the project is started. For that scenario, we can go for runners concept. Okay, guys. Are you clear with my point? Are you clear with my point? So any logic that you want to execute only one time when the application is started, that logic can be implemented by using runners. That logic can be implemented by using runners. Are you clear with what is a banner in the Spring Boot? And are you clear with what is runner in the Spring Boot? Banner is the logo Static data means the data which will not change in the future also, like country names. Country names will change every day, or country names will never change. Someone is asking what is the static data. Static data means the data which is not going to change in the future also. Any data which is fixed, which is not going to change in the future, that data is called as a static data. So for static data, we no need to make a database call every time. If you make a database call every time for the static data, unnecessarily your application performance will be degraded. Your application performance will be degraded when you go for static data. So that's why in the projects, whatever the static data is available, that static data we will read only one time from the database and will store in the memory. That is called cache implementation. Whenever I need that data, I will access the data from the cache only instead of accessing from the database. Whenever I need that data, I will access the data from the cache only instead of accessing from the database. Because if I access the data from the cache, my performance of the application will be improved because cache will be available within our JVM. Database is a separate software. Java application should make a call to the database, which will take some time to execute our query. So instead of hitting the database every time, we'll hit the database only one time. We will get the data. The data will store into cache. So the process of this logic, right, which is responsible to take the data from the database, store into the cache, that logic will keep inside the runner. Runner will be executed by run method. It will execute only one time when the project is started. Are you guys clear? What is a runner in the Spring Boot? Are you guys clear what is runner in the Spring Boot? Runner is used to execute the logic only one time when the project is started. One of the use case for the runner, load the data from database to cache memory. Perfect. Good. So guys, as of now, what we understood in the Spring Boot. So the thing first we understood what is a Spring Boot. Can you guys respond to my questions now? What is Spring Boot? Spring Boot is one approach to develop Spring applications with less configurations. What is a Spring Boot? Spring Boot is one approach to develop Spring-based applications with less configurations. We can develop our applications in two ways. One is by using Spring Framework. Second one is by using Spring Boot. When you go for Spring Framework, lot of configurations we need to write. But when you go for Spring Boot, auto configuration concept is available. So what is the Spring Boot? Spring Boot version history. The first version of the Spring Boot released in the year of 2014. Now the current version of the Spring Boot is Spring Boot 3.0, which released in the year of November 2022. Spring Boot is one approach to develop Spring-based applications with less configurations. Spring Boot first version came in the market 2014. In the last year, November, Spring Boot 3.0 came into market. To work with Spring Boot 3.0, Java 17 is mandatory. Then next one, advantages of Spring Boot. Advantages of Spring Boot. So what are the advantages of the Spring Boot? There are a lot of advantages available. The first one is no XML configuration. When you go for Spring Boot, you no need to write any XML configuration. Everything is annotation based configuration. So now here we have POM starters. POM starters are going to simplify your dependencies in the project. And auto configuration. Whatever the configuration is required for the project, Spring Boot will identify that configuration and will provide that configuration for our project. Okay. Embedded servers. Spring Boot will provide you ready-made server to run our web application. You no need to deploy the project into separate server manually. And actuators. Actuators are helping us to monitor and manage our application. Okay. Then next one. After advantage of the Spring Boot, we discussed about Spring Boot application creation. Guys, could you please tell me how many ways we can create our Spring Boot application? Spring Boot application can be created in two ways. One is by using initializer website. Second one is by using starter project. If you use starter project also, internally it will communicate with the initializer website only. And after that, we understood Spring Boot application folder structure. Whether you use Maven or Gradle, the Spring Boot application folder structure will be same. If it is Maven, form.xml file will be available. If it is Gradle, build.gradle file will be available. Remaining things are same. Main Java, main resources, test Java, test resources, start class and properties file. And we will have that build configuration files will be available. Then after we discussed about what is start class in the Spring Boot, the start class is called as entry point for boot application execution. What is the start class, guys? Start class is called as entry point for boot application. Whether you develop a simple application or you develop a web application or you develop a reactive application, Spring Boot project execution will start from the start class. What is the start class? Start class is the entry point for boot application, which will contain the main method also. Then we discussed about what is @Spring Boot application. We discussed about what is @Spring Boot application. Can you tell me what is @Spring Boot application annotation? Guys, can you tell me what is @Spring Boot application annotation? Can you tell me what is @Spring Boot application annotation? It contains 3 annotations. This one annotation is equal to 3 annotations. What are those 3 annotations? What are those 3 annotations? @auto configuration, @Spring Boot configuration, @Spring Boot configuration, @enable auto configuration, @component scan is available. Okay, we understood what is a component scanning. What is component scanning? Can you please tell me what is a component scanning? Could you please tell me what is the component scanning in the Spring or Spring Boot? So component scanning is different in the Spring and Spring Boot, or the concept is same in the Spring and Spring Boot? Is it different or it is same in the both applications? It is same. It is used to identify the Java classes which are represented as Spring Boots in the Spring application. Component scanning is used to identify the Java classes which are available and represented as Spring Beans in our project. The only one difference is in the Spring application, we need to enable the configuration, that component scanning configuration, but in the Spring Boot, component scanning is by default enabled. In the Spring project, we need to specify to perform the component scanning, but whereas in the Spring Boot, automatically component scanning will be performed. We understood what is base package naming convention. What is base package naming convention in the Spring Boot? So could you please tell me what is base package naming convention in the Spring Boot? Could you please tell me what is base package naming convention in the Spring Boot? What is the default base package in the Spring Boot? Can you guys tell me what is the default base package in the Spring Boot? Which package will be considered as a default base package? Start class package name will be considered as the default base package name. Start class package name, whatever the start class we are getting in the Spring Boot, that start class package name will be considered as the default base package in the Spring Boot application. Okay, can we customize base package names in the Spring Boot? Yes, by using component scanning annotation, we can customize our own base package names also. Can we configure more than one base package name for the component scan? Can we configure more than one base package name to perform the component scanning? Yes, that is also possible. We can configure more than one base package also to perform the component scanning. Okay, guys. So what is Spring application.run method? What is Spring application.run method in Spring Boot? Can anyone tell me what is Spring application.run method in the Spring Boot? What is Spring application.run method in the Spring Boot? Come on, guys. What is the Spring application.run method in the Spring Boot? So that is the entry point for boot application execution. We can say that is the entry point for boot application execution. It is the entry point for the boot application execution. It is doing a lot of stuff internally. Okay. It is going to start the listeners. It is going to print the banner. It is going to call the runners. Lot of things are happening internally inside the run method. What is the Spring application.run method in the Spring Boot? Run method is the entry point for boot application execution. So how IOC will be created in the Spring Boot? How IOC container will be created in Spring Boot? Do I need to create the IOC container in the Spring Boot, or it will be created by run method? Do I need to create the IOC container in the Spring Boot, or it will be created by default using run method? IOC container will be created in the Spring Boot by calling inside the run method. The logic is available to create the IOC container. So which class it is using? Which class will be used to start the IOC container in the Spring Boot? Which class will be used? Which class will be used to start IOC? To start IOC in Spring Boot. Which class will be used to start IOC in the Spring Boot? Application class. Huh? Which class? 3 classes available now. It depends upon the type of the class, right? Type of the application, right? Yesterday I told you. So if it is web application, it will use this class to start the IOC. If it is standalone application, it will use this class to start the IOC. If it is a reactive application, it will use this class to start the IOC. So if it is a standalone application, it will use annotation config application context class to start the IOC. If it is a web starter, it will use annotation config servlet web server application context class to start the IOC. If it is a reactive application, annotation config reactive web server application context class it is going to use to start the IOC. So who is starting the IOC container in the Spring Boot? IOC container is starting by the classes depends upon the type of the application. So based on the type of the application, it will use that particular class to start the IOC container in the Spring Boot. What is the return type of run method in the Spring Boot? What is the return type of Spring application.run method? What is the return type of Spring application.run method? Can you guys tell me? What is the return type of this run method, guys? Void. Poonam, you are wrong. Run method is returning void. Is run method returning void, or it is returning configurable application context? What is the return type of this run method? The return type of the run method is configurable application context. The return type of the run method is configurable application context. Okay, guys. Now, perfect. So what is banner in Spring Boot? What is the banner in the Spring Boot? Can we customize that? What is the banner in the Spring Boot? And can we customize that banner in the Spring Boot? Yes. Banner is the logo that is printing on the console when we run the boot application. And how to customize that banner? By using banner.txt file, we can customize that banner. What is a runner in the Spring Boot? What is a runner in the Spring Boot? Today only we discussed. What is a runner in the Spring Boot? Can you guys please answer? What is runner in the Spring Boot? Logic that you want to execute only one time. In your project, if you want to execute any logic only one time, that will be called as runner. If you want to execute any logic only one time, then you can execute that logic by using runner. So runners will be called manually, or runners will be called by run method. IOC container will call the run method, or runners will be called by run method. IOC container will call the runner, or run method will call the runner. Run method will call the runner. Run method will call the runner. And here we know about what is application.properties file in the Spring Boot. What is application.properties file in the Spring Boot? What is the purpose of application.properties file? What is application.properties file in the Spring Boot? Why do we need that? If you want to configure any application related stuff, application messages, data source properties, banner modes, your data source configurations, such kind of things can be configured by using application.properties file in the Spring Boot. Whenever we create the boot application, we are getting the start class as well as this properties file by default. So the start class is the entry point for the boot application. This application.properties file is used to configure our data source properties. So tomorrow, if I want to configure any data source properties in my project, like I want to connect with MySQL database, I want to connect with Oracle database, the database related configuration we are going to do by using this application.properties file. So as an alternate for the application.properties file, we are having application.yml file also. In the coming sessions, we will understand what is the difference between the properties file and YML file also. In the coming sessions, we are going to discuss the difference between application.properties file and application.yml files as well. Are you guys able to follow me? Are you guys able to follow me? What is the difference between application.properties file and application.yml file? Perfect. Perfect. So application.properties file is used to configure application related properties. Okay. So do we know what is the dependency injection? Do we know what is dependency injection? What is dependency injection? The process of injecting one class object into another class object is called as dependency injection. In the Spring Boot, dependency injection will happen or dependency injection will not happen in the Spring Boot. Dependency injection will happen in the Spring Boot or dependency injection will not happen in the Spring Boot. Dependency injection is happening in the Spring Boot. The process of injecting one class object into another class object is called as dependency injection. So now, how many types of dependency injections we can do in the Spring or Spring Boot? What type of dependency injections we can use in IOC? What type of DI we can perform in Spring or Spring Boot? 3. Constructor, setter, and field. Constructor injection, setter injection, and field injection we can perform by using Spring Boot also. So what is bean scope? What is bean scope in the Spring Boot? What is bean scope in the Spring Boot? What is the purpose of scope in the Spring Boot? What is bean scope in Spring or Spring Boot? Bean scope represents how many objects will be created for a Spring Bean. What is the default scope of the bean in the Spring Boot? What is the default scope? Singleton. So how to customize the bean scope? By using annotations. By using @scope. Okay. Do you know what is auto wiring in the Spring Boot? What is auto wiring? What is auto wiring in the Spring Boot? Do we need to inject the beans manually or Spring can perform auto wiring? Auto wiring is only for the Spring or we can use auto wiring in the Spring Boot also? Guys, auto wiring is only for the Spring or it can be used in the Spring Boot also? in the Spring Boot also. Can I say Spring Boot is replacement for the Spring framework, or we cannot say Spring Boot is replacement for the Spring? We cannot say. Why? Because Spring Boot is internally using Spring concepts only. Spring Boot is internally using Spring concepts only. So what are the modes of the auto wiring? What are the modes available? What are the modes available for auto wiring? By name, by type, constructor. By name, by type, constructor, modes are available for auto wiring. What is bean life cycle? So bean life cycle is applicable for only Spring, or it can be applicable for Spring Boot also. The process of creating the bean object and destroying that is called as life cycle. From starting point to ending point is called as a life cycle. How many ways we can achieve bean life cycle? 3 ways: XML configuration, programmatic configuration, and annotation based configuration also. In 3 ways we can achieve bean life cycle in the Spring. So can I achieve the bean life cycle in the Spring Boot also? What is bean life cycle? We understood. How to represent Java class as a Spring Bean? How to represent Java class as a Spring Bean? @component, @service, @repository. @component, @service, @repository. What is the difference between @component and @bean? What is the difference between @component and @bean annotations? Is there any difference, or there is no difference, guys? Is there any difference between @component and @bean, or there is no difference between @component and @bean? Both are same or both are different? Both are different. If you write @component annotation, then that class object will be created by IOC container and it will be represented as a Spring Bean. And this @component is a class level annotation and @bean is a method level annotation. Okay. So when you write @component at the class level, the object will be created by IOC container. The object will be created by IOC container. Whenever you go for @bean annotation, programmer is going to create the object. That method will be called by IOC container. Method will be called by IOC container. Okay. Are you able to remember all the things that we discussed? Are we able to revise everything that we have discussed so far in our classes? These things will help you for the interview also. These are the questions. These are the questions will help you to attend the interviews also. Good. So that day, when we have developed our Spring application, annotation did not work for us, right? Let me show you that annotation based bean lifecycle class. Let me take one class as some engine. Okay. So this class I want to represent as a Spring Bean @component. @component. So in this class, I'm writing public void M1 and I'm writing public void M2. So this one I'm calling it as system.out.println. This is init method. This is init method. All right. And here I'm going to call it as this is destroy method. Method names also you can change. Instead of M1, you can write the init method. Instead of the M2, you can write the destroy method. Instead of M1, you can, this is init method and this is destroy method. I want to execute these methods as lifecycle methods. So programmatically, you can go for initializing bean and disposable bean. I want to go for annotation based. In the annotation based, here I'm writing @post construct. What is annotation? @post construct. Here I'm writing @pre-destroy. And here I'm writing a zero param constructor to understand when the object got created. System.out.println, I'm going to specify engine constructor. I'm going to specify engine constructor. So this constructor will be executed when the object is created. This init method I have written with the post construct annotation. This destroy method I have written with the pre-destroy annotation. Perfect. Now, so do I need to create the object, or IOC will create the object by default with the help of this component scanning? Do I need to create the object for this class, or IOC will create by default with the component scanning? IOC will create with the component scanning. Now Spring application run method we are calling, it is giving the return type as configurable application context. So once this operation is completed, I'm writing some logic, and here I'm going to do context.close method. I'm closing my IOC container before my main method is getting terminated. Before my main method is getting terminated, I'm closing my IOC container. Okay, let's run this application, run as boot application. Now let us see that engine class object is created, and init method is executed, and runners are executed, destroy method also executed. So are we able to achieve the bean lifecycle through annotations in the Spring Boot also? This is init method and this is a destroy method. The objects are created. The Spring Boot application, this engine class is represented as a Spring Boot application. For this engine class, object is created. What is the proof to say that object is created? Constructor got executed. Whenever the object is created for the class, then constructor will be executed. Whenever object is created, then constructor will be executed. So after the object is created, immediately init method is executed because it is a lifecycle method. Then runners got executed. Runners are available. Runners will be called immediately when the IOC container started. So run method is going to call the runners. Then after that, I'm stopping my IOC container. I'm closing my IOC container. As I'm closing my IOC container will remove all the beans available in the memory. As part of that removal process, it is calling my destroy method also, because I have written pre-destroy annotation. Because I have written pre-destroy annotation, it is removing all the beans from the memory. As the beans are removing from the memory, it is removing my bean also, and it is calling pre-destroy method when it is going to remove the beans from the memory. That's why you can see init method is called and a destroy method is also called. So with this, can we say that bean lifecycle we can achieve in 3 ways: XML approach, programmatic approach, and annotation approach also. So whatever the concepts we have learnt in the Spring Boot, or whatever the fundamental concepts we have learnt in the Spring, all those concepts can be used in the Spring Boot also, because Spring Boot is developed by using Spring concepts only. Spring Boot internally using Spring framework only. Spring Boot is just one approach to develop the Spring application with the Spring concepts only. If you develop a project by using Spring framework, you need to write the configurations manually. Whereas in the Spring Boot, auto configuration facility is available. Are you guys clear with my point? If you want to develop a project by using Spring Boot, these all are the fundamental concepts that you need to know. So we just completed the fundamental concepts to start our applications development. We completed our fundamentals to develop. Now you are qualified to develop Spring Boot applications. Now you are qualified to develop Spring Boot applications because you know all the fundamental concepts of the Spring Boot. You got all the fundamental concepts of the Spring Boot. So what is the Spring Boot? How Spring Boot application will work internally? How IOC container will be started? How the bean objects will be created? What is bean lifecycle? What is bean scope? What is auto wiring? Okay. What is a runner in the Spring Boot? What is a banner in the Spring Boot? What is a dependency injection? How many ways we can perform dependency injection in the Spring Boot? So we are clear with all the fundamental concepts. Come on, guys. Are you good with this one? Are you good with this one? Now, are you confident about the Spring Boot basic fundamentals? What is the use of post construct annotation? Post construct annotation will execute your init method. If you want to execute any method immediately after your bean object is created, then you can write the post construct. After your bean object is created, this post construct will execute like a init method to achieve the lifecycle methods. To achieve lifecycle methods. Good. Can you guys tell me what is a setter injection? What is a constructor injection? What is a field injection? Can you guys tell me what is a setter injection? What is setter injection, guys? Injecting through the setter method. If the object is injecting through the setter method, then that is called as a setter injection. So if the object is injected through the constructor, then that is called as a constructor injection. If the object is injected through variable, then it is called as a field injection. It is called as a field injection. All right. I will give you one task now. Can you guys do that as an assignment? You need to do some research in the internet. So which dependency injection is better? Which dependency injection is better? So setter or constructor or field. Out of these three dependency injections, which dependency injection is better in the project? Can you guys do that analysis on your own before coming to tomorrow's session? Can you guys do that analysis? Come on, guys. Can you do that analysis before coming to tomorrow's session? Which dependency injection is better and why it is better? I want you people to analyze before coming to tomorrow class. Which dependency injection is better and why it is better? I want you people to analyze and give me the answer in the tomorrow session. Are you okay? Are you guys okay for that? Yes, very good. Perfect. Good, guys. So the fundamental concepts of the Spring and Spring Boot completed now. So we need to learn how to develop our applications by using Spring Boot, how to develop database communication based applications, and how to develop REST APIs, how to develop web applications, how to develop microservice based applications that we need to understand going forward. Yeah. Anybody having any questions? Can you ask me? I will share these notes, guys. So don't worry about it.
Please share the Gradle notes also, sir.
Sure, sir. Gradle notes. Yeah, I forgot to share it. I will share that as well.
Okay, yeah, sure. Thanks. And one doubt on the auto runner. Instead of runner, as you said, can we use the lifecycle method also? Is there alternative way? Or?
Yeah, I will tell you that question. Good question. Guys, he is asking, instead of going for the runner, can we go for the life cycle method?
Yes, sir.
Life
Yes,
cycle,
sir.
life cycle method is at the class level. Okay. So if that life cycle method is at the class level, if that class scope is prototype, every time when the object is created, then life cycle method will exist. Runner is at the project level. So throughout the project, only one time runner will be called. Life cycle method is at the bin level and a runner is at the project level, application level. You got my point, sir?
Yes, yes, sir. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, fine.
Hello,
Sir,
sir.
one question.
Yeah,
Sir,
please.
where can we see those videos, sir? Like every day's class. Can we access those videos?
So if you have in the plan 2, you can access the backup videos also. Okay.
Plan
So
2 means?
So if you, I mean, in the demo session, I told you, right, 7,000 course means you will attend the live classes, 10,000 course means you will access the backup videos also.
Oh, okay, okay. Got it, sir. Thank you.
Hi, sir.
Perfect. Yeah, hello.
सर इंटरव्यू में सर अगर पूछेंगे तो हम कितना मिनट तक करेंगे एक्सप्लेन मींस पर each question?
Yeah, you can explain that.
No, sir. कितना मिनट हम करेंगे explain?
Kitna minute pe, that depends, man. So every question we can answer within 1 minute with scenario, question answer scenario depends on, right? So we can't fix that time, how much time we need to give the answer. So whatever you know about that question you need to answer, then on that answer, whatever you have given, they will ask you the next question, right? So we can't give you fixed time, how much time we need to spend it to answer that.
Okay.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, hello.
Sir, actually my question is, I have been asked a question that a person asked me a question that what is the disadvantage of dependency injection, that in which case you should not use it. So what can I answer to that person?
So dependency injection disadvantage. So as of now, I don't see any disadvantage with the dependency injection, sir. Because of the dependency injection, our applications will become loosely coupled, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I replied the same, sir.
So I don't see any disadvantage with this. So let me do some research. Is there any really disadvantage with that? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Can you explain the qualifier annotation real scenario? Actually, even
Sir.
I explained the proper way, but
Sir,
interviewer not
qualifier annotation real scenario, I will tell you. So we are going to create multiple database connections in the Spring Boot. For MySQL, we'll create one data source, and for Oracle database, we'll create one data source. So when we have multiple database connections, each data source will have its own name. So to inject them based on the name, we will use a qualifier. So now I can't tell you that complete example because we have not covered data JPA. In the data JPA, you will understand how to connect with the database, how to connect with multiple databases using Spring Boot. At that time, I will tell you how to use a qualifier annotation.
Okay.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Will you provide us assignment for some task?
I will give that assignments also, sir. I will give that. Currently, we are understanding the fundamental concepts, right? You will get the assignments also.
Okay.
Okay.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, how to handle expression in Spring Boot?
Man, don't ask questions for future topics, sir. We will discuss that at future sessions, right?
Okay.
No, sir. Which runner is recommended in the real-time project?
Which annotation?
Runner, application runner or command line.
Anything is fine, sir. Anything is fine. Both are doing the same thing, right? Anything is fine. Just the difference is with the parameters.
Okay. Thanks.
Hello, sir. Can we use at-the-date component annotation in the place of at-the-date repository? If we can do what happening?
It will create the object for that class. So instead of component, you can keep repository also. It will be represented as a Spring Bean. But the difference is repository annotation will have the additional functionality to translate the database exceptions into Spring exceptions. Okay. So in place of service, you can use component. In place of some component, you can use repository. So, but the thing is, so the repository annotation will have some additional capability to convert the database exceptions, it will translate the exceptions basically. That's why for DAO classes, we will use the repository annotation.
Okay, I got it.
Hi, sir.
Sir, can you give
Hello?
examples on application runner and command line runner, sir? Any example?
I told you scenario, right? So that is, if you want to load the data from database to the cache, we will go for
I
the-
understand that, but where can we use the application runner and where can we use the command line runner?
So when we go for the database concepts, right there, we are going to develop that.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Then second question is, what are the bean aware interfaces, sir? Because when some bean name aware.
Yeah, we did not talk about them. Those are the Spring basic concepts. Bean aware interfaces are available. PNC namespaces are available. So those concepts we are not much using in the Spring Boot. So if you want, I can discuss those things also.
Just if you can give me when if you have time, just give one or two lines, sir. That's it.
Sure, sir. Okay.
Because in the interviews they're asking that. That's why.
Sure, sir.
Okay.
Sir, in real-time project, we are using application runner and command line runner.
Yeah, one runner we will use, sir. Any one runner is sufficient for that. Whatever the requirement we have to execute the code only once, for that we can go for any one thing.
Based on requirement.
Correct.
Hello, sir. Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, my doubt is when is the Java real-time project batch is starting, sir? In February.
Yeah. So February ending it will start, sir. We will, so in the morning 8:31 batch is running. Once it is completed, then we will start that batch.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Sure. So guys, please refer all the questions that I have mentioned in the document, and please practice all the concepts. Without having the knowledge on these concepts, so you can't understand the application development in the coming sessions. Yes, sir. Tell me.
So one small question, like so yesterday you used a command, like to use to see the internals of a run method, like what is the command?
It's not command, sir. Just keep your control button and click on that method. You will go inside that.
Control button and you need to
click on that method. Yeah, control button and click on that method. That's it.
Yeah, Ashok, I have one question. I saw your collection videos on your like Ashok IT channel on YouTube. So like, is this complete collection videos over there, or like some
complete
videos?
Collection. Complete collection. Yeah, complete collection framework is available.
All right. Okay.
So hello, today I'm uploading Stream API video in the YouTube. You can go through that.
Hello, sir. Also share array and string videos.
Arrays video already I have shared. String videos also available in the YouTube. Top 10 logical questions on the strings I have explained in the videos. I will share the link. And arrays also I have explained and uploaded the video.
Hello, sir.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, is it fully stream concept only covered in that video, sir?
So just introduction part of the stream is covered. What is stream? How to filter? How to map the stream? I have explained.
Okay, fine.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, hello.
One of the interview asked me how many main method we have in single Spring Boot application.
One main method only.
One method. Okay.
Ashok, can you share that collection notes with us? Is it possible?
It's already shared in the Telegram, sir. A PDF we have shared, collections bit. I will share in our group also.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Hello.
Yeah.
Sir, I have one question.
Please.
Yeah, in Spring we not have main method, but in Spring Boot are available main methods. Why? This is a interview questions.
Because as you already seen that in the run method, lot of logic is available to execute the boot applications, na? Because of that they have given that. So they don't want programmers to take care of the configurations. That's why they have taken the configurations on their own and they have kept that in the run method. So every Spring Boot application will start from the run method so that we will get the default behavior, whatever is required for the Spring Boot applications.
Yes.
Sir, can you please share the Gradle class notes?
I will share that, sir. Whatever I have written in the notes, class will share that.
Hello, sir.
Once interviewer was asked me when we use auto wire, that time by default which dependency injection is used.
It depends, right? If you use auto wire annotation at the variable level, field injection will be used. If you use at the setter method level, setter injection will be used. If you use at the constructor, constructor injection will be. It depends where you keep that annotation. All right. Auto wiring annotation we can keep at 3 places: at setter method level, at constructor level, at variable level. If you keep at the variable level, it will perform the variable injection, the field injection. If you keep at the setter method level, it will perform the setter injection. It depends upon that.
Okay.
Hello. Hi, sir.
Yes, sir.
Regarding the scope of a bean, okay. Here we have discussed that there are 4 types of scope: request, request session, prototype, and a singleton. Okay.
All right.
And
Yeah.
there's another scope, okay, global scope, okay, global session. Is it deprecated?
Global session removed in the Spring Boot 3.x version. Spring 3.x version. That is not available now.
Okay.
Hello, sir.
Okay.
We are going to learn in this course microservices design patterns.
No, sir. Microservice design patterns are not part of this course. I have given the syllabus copy, right? Whatever is mentioned in that, those things will be covered.
Sir, design pattern in singleton?
Singleton design pattern, I will explain that, sir.
Okay, sir.
Sir,
Thank you very much.
microservice will cover or microservice also not cover?
Sir, please see the course. Without this course name itself is Spring Boot Microservices, sir. But without microservices, how can we complete this course?
Because interest also I'm facing the
Microservices design patterns also, because the interviewer asking too much
many
questions.
yeah, most of the questions
Sure, sir.
we are
Some
facing.
patterns I will explain. Some patterns I will explain. Okay.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, madam.
Sir, can you, in coming classes, can you explain about the payment gateway? Because most interviewers ask about the payment gateway also. So
Sure,
can you
sure.
cover that?
Sure. Okay, fine, guys.
If you not explain the microservice design pattern, when will start the planning to start the microservice design pattern?
Some patterns I will explain that. So as of now, there is no plan for starting a new batch for the design patterns. Okay. So some patterns which are required for us, I will cover in the class itself.
Okay.
Right. Perfect. Thank you, guys. So with this, I'm stopping for today. We'll see you in the tomorrow session. So please go through all the topics which we have covered, revise them, and we need to start our applications development by using Spring Boot. See you in the next session tomorrow. Bye-bye. Good night.